So here's something new I learned this past week. Imagine a person who's incredibly pious. They go to church all the time. They pray fervently. They meticulously follow all the rituals required by their faith. And to boot, they actually believe in the doctrines of their religion. Now, I want you to imagine that this very religious person is also grossly immoral. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they abuse the weak, they wage aggressive war, and they're brutally violent on the battlefield. Even if you're not a religious person and you don't believe in any sort of God at all, I think you might find this image really jarring, disturbing, deeply hypocritical, and inconsistent. Well, why? I think most everyone in our modern world thinks that religion and ethical and moral behavior are inherently and essentially linked. Religion and morality are woven together into a single fabric. The concepts are inseparable. They are practically interchangeable. The words religious and moral are practically synonyms in our minds. However, this basic and practically universal assumption did not always was not always the case. I've been reading a few books in the past few weeks, and they kind of sparked some thoughts in my mind, which I thought I'd like to share or just think out loud with you. So here's like the idea I got from these books I've been reading, and they got me thinking. I think it's absolutely fascinating. The religion of the ancient Greeks and Romans, or the religions of the ancient Near East as well. And ancient people believed in their gods, and they certainly worshiped their gods. But the gods were not moral, good, or ethical. In fact, they were pretty awful. I remember reading lots of classical mythology in middle school and high school. I confess, I was a Latin nerd. And I remembered how awful Zeus, Hera, and Apollo and the rest really were. They were petty, they were vengeful, they were cruel. I remember thinking at the time, wow, that's really weird. I mean, I refer to them now as the real housewives of Olympus. And yet the ancient people worshiped their gods, these gods who behaved absolutely immorally. Why? Well, I think because probably they were tribal. Every city, polis, or ethnic group, they had their own patron god or gods. And these gods were jerks for sure, but they were your gods and they were powerful, and you needed them to fight on your side and protect you from the other gods and other nations because those other people out there, they also have gods fighting for them. And their gods are jerks too. So you better appease your god and get him or her on your side. Or, just think about Homer's Iliad and how the gods behaved. And you worship your god also for transactional reasons. It was a quid pro quo. You want to win a war? Kill a bunch of bulls and wage war for your god. Kill a bunch of bulls before you wage war, and your war god will, protect you. Want a good harvest? Go to the temple and the priest and make some sacrifices. You're giving something to get something for your gods. Even if they were jerks, you needed these gods on your side. Later on, Greek philosophers began to think about morality and ethics and how to live. Questions like, what is the good life? Stoics and later Aristotle were thinking about morality and ethics and decency and how to live a good life. I mean, the Stoics believed that there was some consistent and coherent law in the universe. And you could discover these laws or these principles. And the way to live a good life was to discover these universal principles and live your life in harmony with these principles. So I find this fascinating. There is religion, temples, priests, and sacrifices, and then there's philosophy. And from that, you can learn how to live a good life, a moral life. I just think that's just really interesting. So where do we ever get the idea that is so pervasive in our modern world that it seems axiomatic that morality and religion cohere together? Or according to this book I'm reading by Tom Holland called Dominion, well, actually, the origin, according to him, is Judaism. The Jewish god, called Elohim sometimes, was powerful, like all gods, but he also demanded rigorous moral and ethical behavior out of his people because he himself was rigorously moral and ethical. And here's another difference. Okay, the Stoics imagine morality as rooted in universal principles, of the universe. And Aristotle imagined God as the unmoved mover. Morality and God were utterly impersonal, according to the philosophers. But this Jewish God, this Elohim, he was personal. He was jealous. He loves his people and wants his people to love him back. And this is a really wild part. God made covenants with his people, which was unheard of. Covenants and God in religion were common in the ancient Near East. But this always meant that I'm going to make an agreement with another person, and God is going to be there as our witness. And if one of us reneges or breaks the agreement, God will punish a guilty party. The covenant calls upon God to punish a person who's guilty in this transaction. But this Elohim, this God, makes a covenant with his people. The asymmetry is absurd. So there you go. We now have a God who is either real or in popular cultural imagination, but this God is powerful, personal, and moral. A moral and powerful God. So that's good, right? But it creates new problems, and that is a problem of evil and suffering. But more on that next time.